Hey there, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the invisible details that make our absolute favorite digital products feel, well, alive and intuitive. Have you ever wondered why you just love using certain apps, while others, which basically do the exact same thing, just leave you wanting to pull your hair out? Well, the secret isn't usually in the massive, flashy features. Nope, it's hidden in the microscopic moments of interaction. We're going to focus on interaction design today. Specifically, we'll look at how microanimations, seamless UI transitions, and haptic feedback really act as the secret sauce in modern app development. Design expert Dan Safer really hit the nail on the head when he said the difference between a product we love and a product we just tolerate are often the micro-interactions we have with it. That perfectly sets the stage for our journey. We're moving from static, unresponsive interfaces to dynamic, multi-sensory experiences. It perfectly captures how user experience has evolved, right? We no longer just want software to work, we expect it to feel incredibly smooth, polished, and satisfying. That leap from just tolerating a product to actually loving it happens right there in the margins, in those tiny, subtle interactions. So, let's make sure we're on the exact same page here. What are microinteractions? Basically, they are small, task-based trigger feedback pairs that communicate system status through highly contextual visual or tactile changes. You can think of them as the fundamental building blocks of interaction design. They're the near-invisible functional details that take a dull, flat screen and turn it into something that feels deeply human and responsive. Seriously, every single time you like a post, set an alarm, or sync your data, you are engaging in a microinteraction.
Here is our quick roadmap for today's explainer. We'll be looking at 1. The power of small details. 2. Anatomy of a microinteraction. 3. Visualizing with microanimations. 4. Feeling with haptic feedback. 5. Design best practices. And finally, 6. The macro impact.
Section 1. The power of small details, bridging human expectation and digital reality.
You know, in a totally saturated market, user experience is very often your only real differentiator. The difference between an app you absolutely love and one you just tolerate is hidden right there in those invisible functional details. I mean, just imagine Tinder without the satisfying physical feeling of that swipe animation. Or picture Instagram without the fluid, pulsing heart that pops up when you double-tap a photo. If you stripped away those small visual feedbacks, the entire experience would feel completely broken, wouldn't it? The swipe empowers you with a quick, intuitive way to express a preference, and the animated heart instantly celebrates that action. Without them, those apps would just feel lifeless.
Moving on to Section 2, Anatomy of a Microinteraction, Deconstructing the Science.
Let's break down how this actually works behind the scenes using Dan Safer's 4 stages. It's a very strict anatomical flow. It always starts with the trigger. Now that could be you physically tapping a button or a system-initiated trigger like receiving a text message. Next, the rules kick in. They dictate what happens based on the internal logic of the app. After that comes the feedback, which is what you actually experience. It's the animation or the vibration confirming that the rule was executed. And finally, loops and modes determine the lifespan of the interaction. Does it repeat? Does it change the app's state? Every single well-designed microinteraction follows this exact blueprint.
Section 3. Visualizing with microanimations, creating visual system status.
What's super interesting to look at here is how a simple drop shadow and color shift can completely transform a flat digital box into what feels like a tangible object. You can see how a button smoothly transitions from normal to focused, then depresses physically when pressed and grays out when disabled, instead of just snapping instantly from one state to another. This visual micro-interaction actually mimics the mechanical click of a real physical keyboard. It taps right into our real-world intuition, making the digital interface immediately understandable, without us needing to read a single word of instruction.
But you know, it goes far beyond just clicking buttons. These visual flourishes actively drive the entire user experience. Take dynamic loading bars, like the ones in Figma. They turn agonizing wait times into engaging, informative moments. Or, when you schedule an email in MailChimp, you get that high-five animation that actually celebrates your accomplishment. And Asana, they have a mythical unicorn that flies across the screen when you complete a task, because honestly, who doesn't need a little gamified magic to get through the workday? On platforms like eBay, dynamic password fields instantly turn green as you hit the security criteria, preventing frustrating rework. So these tiny visual details don't just look pretty. They're literally working to prevent errors, guide our workflows, and communicate the app's core brand identity. All right, Section 4. Feeling with haptic feedback, the tactile layer.
The crucial point here is the contrast in how we process information. We are constantly bombarded with visual and auditory alerts all day long.
Eventually, our screens feel cluttered and we just end up muting our devices to make the noise stop. Vibrotactile feedback, however, is a totally different story. It remains a discreet, frictionless way to communicate. A really subtle pulse in your hand can tell you an action was successful without adding to the visual noise on your screen or disrupting the quiet of your room. It's brilliant.
And that brings us to a relatively new and frankly absolutely fascinating field, haptic experience design, or HXD for short. It's the process of combining touch-oriented vibrotactile sensations with interactive elements to create a truly immersive, multisensory user experience. By leveraging advanced hardware, like Apple's Haptic engine, which came out back in 2015, HXD can literally simulate the feeling of a mechanical switch clicking even though you're just pressing a flat piece of glass. Not only does this massively deepen the immersion, but it profoundly enhances accessibility for users with visual or auditory impairments by giving them physical confirmation of their actions.
The craziest part? This tactile revolution isn't just restricted to native mobile apps anymore. The web is catching up fast. Using the Vibration API, web developers can now trigger specific vibration patterns directly in the browser using simple JavaScript, like the navigator.vibrate function. Just imagine submitting a really complex web form and feeling a reassuring physical pulse in your hand confirming it actually went through, or playing a browser-based game and literally feeling every collision. It brings the tactile sensation directly into the browser, making those simple button clicks feel grounded and real.
Section 5. Design Best Practices. The Rules of Engagement. Of course, with great power comes great responsibility. You can't just throw animations and vibrations everywhere and hope for the best. If we look at Apple's human interface guidelines for haptics, a very clear theme emerges, and that theme is restraint. You absolutely must build a clear causal relationship to the trigger. Haptics should complement your visual feedback, not replace it, creating what's called a multimodal experience. And most importantly, use them judiciously. Over-vibrating or over-animating will completely ruin an experience and just leave the user feeling overwhelmed or annoyed. Subtlety and the principle of less is more really needs to be your guiding light here. Oh, and always make it optional.
But why must it be optional? Well, because as research clearly shows, haptic feedback is incredibly subjective. What feels like a really satisfying success pulse to one user might feel like a startling or frustrating error buzz to someone else. We all interpret physical touch a little bit differently. Because of this deeply visceral, emotional reaction, making your micro-interactions customizable, basically allowing users to tweak or turn off haptics entirely, ensures you aren't accidentally alienating parts of your user base.
And finally, Section 6, the macro impact, from micro to macro.
Let's zoom back out and summarize the big picture. The return on investment for spending time on these tiny details is actually immense. Micro-interactions transform dull wait times into engaging little moments. They significantly reduce friction and cognitive load, which simply means the user doesn't have to think as hard to use your app. They provide accessible, multisensory guidance, and perhaps most importantly for businesses, they differentiate products in a highly crowded market and foster deep, emotional brand loyalty. Ultimately, designing at the micro level forces you to relentlessly focus on the user's journey, which proves that the absolute smallest details are truly the most important.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this question to ponder. Take a hard look at your own digital products, or even just the ones you use every single day, and ask yourself, are your app's micro-interactions creating a memorable, intuitive experience, or are they just adding unnecessary noise? Remember, the difference between a product we just tolerate and one we actually love is quite literally right there at your fingertips. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.